Hi, Christine Eddy.
Thank you, Ron. Good morning.
Good morning.
You have lived in Canton your whole life?
Correct.
Graduated from Canton High School?
Yes.
Have been friends with Brian Albert Jr. since high school?
Yes.
I believe you said it's been probably about 10 years now that you've been friends?
Correct.
And the two of you actually went to the junior prom together, correct?
Correct.
You consider him a close friend.
Correct.
You've been to his house many times?
Yes.
You've gone inside the home and you've spent time in the backyard as well?
Yes.
Gone swimming in the pool that they had in the backyard?
Yes.
And in high school you would hang out in their basement, would you not?
That's correct.
And you know that there's, in that basement, a bulkhead door that leads to the backyard, correct?
I never noticed it.
You're also on good terms with other members of the Albert family?
Correct.
You know his brothers and sisters, correct?
Correct.
Caitlin Albert, Brendan Albert, Kayla Albert, and Jack Albert?
Yes.
You also know his cousins?
Depends which ones, but yes.
Some of them.
Yes.
You know that Jennifer McCabe's daughters are Brian Albert Jr.'s cousins, correct?
Correct.
And you know both of Brian Jr.'s parents, Brian Albert Sr. and Nicole Albert, correct?
That's correct.
And you actually call Nicole Albert by her nickname, correct?
Sometimes yes.
And what is that nickname?
Coco?
And you know Brian Albert Sr. relatively well, having been over the house so many times, correct?
Depends what you qualify as well, but yes.
Do you find him a little standoffish?
He's quiet.
But in any case, you're comfortable at the Albert home.
That's correct.
And you were at the Albert home on the night of January 28th, going into the 29th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
Got there around 8 p.m.?
Correct.
And you didn't leave until around 2 a.m., give or take, on the 29th, correct?
Correct.
So, again, ballpark figures, if you were there from 8 p.m. until 2 a.m., that means that you spent about 6 hours at the Albert home that night into the early morning?
Correct.
And you yourself never left the home during those 6 hours, correct?
Correct.
You were inside the home the entire time.
Correct.
Were you interviewed by any police officer, state trooper, or other investigator about the events of that night on January 29th of 2022?
On that day?
Yeah, were you interviewed?
No.
What about the rest of January or even February of 2022? Were you interviewed by any investigator?
No.
The fact of the matter is that no investigator connected with this case took a statement from you in terms of an interview until about 9 months later, correct?
Correct.
And that was done at the district attorney's office on October 21st of 2022?
Correct.
Now, that night while you were at the house, you'll agree with me that there were people coming and going from the house the whole night, correct?
I mean, you would have to be more specific.
Okay, so I'm not talking about like every minute on the minute, but during those 6 hours, you saw people come and you saw people leave, correct?
Yes.
But you were not standing guard at the door to take note of everyone who was entering or leaving or the times that they were entering or leaving, correct?
Correct.
You were not keeping a log, for instance, of when somebody came in or when somebody left.
No.
And when you got there around 8 a.m., you came with your good friend Julie Nagel, correct?
Yes.
Julie's father dropped you off there.
Yes.
You saw Nicole Albert, Julie Albert, Caitlin Albert, and Brian Albert Jr. when you arrived, right?
Correct.
Then Julie Albert, Caitlin Albert, and Nicole Albert left, right?
Yes.
But then 4 other friends of Brian Jr. arrived, right?
Yes.
And you would name them when Mr. Lally was asking you questions before the break, right?
Yes, correct.
So with those 4 friends, with you and Julie and Brian Jr., that meant that at that point there were 7 people in the house, right?
Yes.
Actually, there were 8 people because Colin Albert was there as well, correct?
It depends on what time you're referring to, but yes.
He got dropped off there at some point.
Yes.
And then he was one of the 8 people, including yourself, that you were with.
Correct.
You never saw him walk in the door, did you?
I don't remember.
You don't remember seeing him actually enter the house, correct?
Correct.
But during the night, you actually sat right next to Colin Albert at the table, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And with regard to Colin Albert, I believe you testified, you really wouldn't say he's a friend of yours, right?
That's correct.
He was more of an acquaintance, was he not?
That's correct.
Somebody that you met, but you didn't hang around with, right?
Yes.
You have never been in a hot tub with Colin Albert, correct?
Not that I know of, no.
You never took a trip to Maine with Colin Albert, right?
Objection.
No. Sustained.
Because going away on a road trip, that'd be something that you do with a friend, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Okay. And with regard to those 4 friends of Brian Jr. who arrived, your best estimate is that they came sometime between 11 p.m. and 12 a.m., right?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. I'm talking about Courtney Albert, Catherine Duty, Emily Fabiano, and Mary Kent. Strike that. You know what? Let me withdraw that question and rephrase it. They left sometime between 11 p.m. and 12 a.m.
Correct.
And you can't be sure precisely when they left because, again, you weren't watching the clock to make note of when people made their exits, correct?
I know they left before it was Brian Jr.'s birthday on the 29th, so I know it was before midnight, but other than that, no.
Right, and that's like an hour span of time that they could have left within, correct?
Correct.
You never saw Colin Albert physically walk out the door, did you?
I don't remember.
And then at some point before midnight, Brian Albert Sr., Brian Higgins, Nicole Albert, Jennifer McCabe, and Caitlin Albert all arrived at the Albert home, correct?
Yes, I don't know if you said Matt McCabe, but yes.
And Matt McCabe as well.
Yes.
And you would agree with me that Brian Higgins and Brian Albert arrived at about the same time?
Yes.
And that Caitlin Albert, Jennifer, and Matt McCabe, and Nicole Albert all came back around the same time?
Correct.
Now, from that point until the time that you left around, and that was around 2 a.m., right, give or take?
Correct.
From that point until around 2 a.m., the only person who left the house was your friend Julie Nick, right?
Correct.
Your understanding was that she went outside to talk to her brother Ryan Nick, right?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And in addition to not remembering seeing Colin Albert leave, you also did not see Brian Higgins physically leave, correct?
I don't remember.
And you also don't remember seeing Caitlin Albert leave, correct?
No, I don't remember.
You would agree with me that throughout the night while you were at the house, Caitlin Albert was playing music on her phone?
Yes.
There were surround sound speakers set up in the kitchen dining room area?
I don't remember that.
There were speakers though, correct?
Possibly.
So
I don't remember.
Your memory is not that Caitlin Albert had a song or songs playing on her small iPhone, was it?
No, it was on a speaker. I'm just not sure if it was surround sound or a Bluetooth speaker like it was previously in the night.
All right, fair enough. People were singing and dancing, right?
Correct.
Pretty much everybody was singing, correct?
Correct.
People were talking.
Correct.
Everybody appeared to be in a good mood and having a good time.
Yes.
And with the music, the singing, the dancing, the talking, the drinking, there was a lot of activity going on in the kitchen dining room area, correct?
Yes.
There was plenty of, to pay attention to with regard to the people that were in that area, right?
Yes.
Brian Jr. was in the kitchen essentially the whole night.
Yes.
Jennifer McCabe was charging her phone on the kitchen island at one point.
Behind it, but yes.
Did she pick up her phone in your presence to make any calls or text anybody?
She picked up her phone. I'm not sure what she did with it.
But in any case, you'd agree with me it was noisy in the kitchen.
Yes.
And the kitchen's in the back of the house.
Yes.
Now, you had seen the Albert family dog, the German Shepherd, Chloe, prior to that day, correct?
Yes.
And Chloe was not a very outgoing dog around people, correct?
Correct.
In fact, your impression was that she was a former police dog, correct?
Possibly.
Right or wrong?
Maybe. I don't know.
While you were in the kitchen, with all of the singing and dancing and talking and music going on, you did not hear Chloe bark, correct?
Correct.
You did not hear Chloe growl, correct?
Correct. Not that I remember.
You did not hear somebody get hit in the back of the head with anything, correct?
Objection.
Go ahead, you can answer that.
Correct.
And while you were there sitting, you could not hear what, if anything, was going on in the basement, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Okay. You were catching a ride home with the McCabe's ultimately, correct?
Correct.
At that time, you believed that you, Julie Nagel, Jennifer McCabe, and Matt McCabe were the last to leave 34 Fairview?
Correct.
So at that time, you believed that Brian Higgins and Caitlin Albert had left before you, correct?
I believe so.
But you didn't see Brian Higgins or Caitlin Albert physically walk out the door. At least you have no memory of that, correct?
Correct.
And when you left, you didn't check every room in the house to see who was still there, correct?
Correct.
You never went down to the basement that night.
That's correct.
And when you left 34 Fairview, the snow was starting to stick to the ground at around 2 a.m.,
That's correct.
but there weren't mounds of snow or snowbanks that had formed, correct?
Correct.
And when you left the home, you could still see part of the red brick of the walkway that leads to the driveway, correct?
Correct.
And when you got to the driveway, you could still see part of the color of the pavement, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you could still see some grass on the front lawn at 2 a.m., right?
I don't remember, but
Let me have a moment.
Yes.
You testified at a hearing on May 11th of 2023, so just about a year ago, in Boston, correct?
correct.
And neither the prosecution in this case, Mr. Lally and Ms. McLaughlin, or any of the defense team was there, correct?
Correct.
Some other lawyer was asking you questions, right?
Objection.
Sustained, move along with this.
Sure. You were asked the question, quote, could you see the grass sort of on the lawn? And that was when you were leaving. And your answer was yes. Do you recall that question and answer?
I don't recall that.
If I suggested to you that that was the question and answer, would you dispute it?
Objection.
Sustained.
Is your memory exhausted as to whether there was that question of you and that answer given?
Can you rephrase that?
Sure. Do you not remember whether you were asked that question that I just read and the answer that you just gave?
I don't remember.
Okay. If you saw that transcript, would that refresh your memory?
Possibly.
Page 187, Counsel. May I approach?
Was there an objection? No? Yes, you may.
Thank you. Actually, I'm sorry. I just handed it to you and then took it away. I'm sorry about that. Lines 10 and 11, I would direct your attention. And just read it silently to yourself, please, and look up at me when you're done. I may approach to grab that. Having reviewed that transcript, does that refresh your memory as to what you testified to a year ago?
Yes.
And was that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
With the word being sort of.
Yeah, well, I believe I read the
Yes,
question.
I'm just clarifying, yeah.
But I did read it accurately. right?
Correct.
Okay. Where was the McCabe's car parked?
In the driveway.
What other cars did you see in the driveway at that time?
I believe the by Albert family, I mean the ones that owned that house.
Your parents?
Yes, correct. Their cars.
Do you know how many?
2.
And where were those 2 cars parked? Strike that. Were there 2 lanes in the driveway where cars could park?
Yes,
And which lane, to the left or the right, were the Albert cars? Or maybe they were in both.
I believe both, closest to the garage.
Okay, so they were pulled up closest to the entrance of the garage.
Correct.
In tandem, right next to each other.
Correct.
All right. And where was the McCabe's car behind? Which car?
If you're looking at the house, the lane to the left, I believe.
Okay. Now, when you first walked out of the Albert home, you'd agree with me that the front lawn was right in front of you, correct?
Yes.
There were no obstructions blocking your view of that front lawn.
No.
And there were lights on next to the Albert home front lawn, correct?
Correct.
And there was also a lamppost where the front walkway is, correct?
Correct.
And between the 2 garage doors, there's also a spotlight, is there not?
Correct.
And you would testify that snow had started to accumulate, right?
Correct.
And against that white snow, did you see a black baseball cap?
No.
Did you see a black sneaker?
No.
Did you see a 6'2", 220-pound man sprawled out right in front of you on that lawn?
No.
Did you see 45 pieces of red plastic?
No.
1 piece of red plastic?
No.
So you saw nothing unusual on that front lawn as you walked out of that house, correct?
That's correct.
As Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, and Julie Nagel were walking toward the McCabe car, none of them pointed to the front lawn to direct your attention to anything, correct?
That's correct.
In fact, you would testify that Matt McCabe forgot something and had to go back in the house, correct?
Correct.
Which means he actually came out of the house twice that night, correct?
Correct.
And the second time he came out, he still would have been facing that front lawn, correct?
Correct.
And the second time that Matt McCabe came out, he didn't point at anything in the front lawn, correct?
That's correct.
And then the 4 of you were in the McCabe car, right?
Yes.
Matt McCabe was driving.
Yes.
Jennifer McCabe was in the front passenger seat next to him.
Yes.
Julie Nagel was seated behind the driver, behind Matt McCabe, right?
Yes.
And you were seated in the second row passenger seat to the right,
Yes.
behind where Jennifer McCabe was sitting.
Yes.
And the car backed out of the driveway, correct?
Yep.
And the rear of the car was then facing toward Cedar Crest.
Correct.
And the front of the car, where you were going to drive toward, would be toward Chapman Street, correct?
That's correct.
Which would have put you driving right past the Albert property line, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you were closer to that property line than Julie Nagel was, correct?
That's
As
correct.
you drove past?
Yes.
And as you drove past that front lawn, you saw nothing out of the ordinary, right?
I wasn't looking, but yes.
Okay. And we had previously talked about the fact that you were first interviewed by investigators on October 21st of 2022, right?
Correct.
And the investigator that spoke to you about 9 months after January 29th of 2022, you will agree with me, was Michael Proctor, correct?
That's correct.
And almost a year after that, you were visited by 2 female members of the defense team, were you not?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
My home was.
Okay. Do you recognize Ms. Little seated at council table as being one of those 2 females?
Okay, I'm going to see it, sidebar.
Is it fair to say, Ms. Levinson, that you decided not to speak to anybody from the defense team?
That is correct.
And you hadn't before you and I just started this discussion, correct?
That is correct.
Nothing further, thank you, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Lally.
Ms. Levinson, with regard to the basement at 34 Fairview, when was the last time that you were in the basement area of the home?
Early college. So 2017, maybe?
That period of time that you were talking about where Ms. McCabe had her phone on a charger and was coming over to check on it, do you recall whether or not Colin Albert was still in the house at that point?
I don't believe so.
You don't believe he was, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, you come out of the house, you were asking questions about the lawn. The portion of the front lawn that you are talking about, as far as you observed, where is that in relation to the driveway?
To the, well, if you're,
Let me ask you a different way. So as far as, with respect to the front lawn area of the home, what part of the lawn did you make any observations of, or did you look at or see it when you were walking from the doorway to the vehicle?
when I walked out of the front door, I went down the steps of the stoop and I looked in front of me, like down, not straight. So it would be the grass that borders the front walkway.
So you weren't looking at sort of the entirety of the front lawn, is that correct?
That is correct.
And when you spoke with Trooper Proctor, was he the only trooper there, the only state police officer there when you spoke with him?
No.
Do you recall who the other trooper was?
I don't remember the name specifically. It was not like a common last name, though. I know that.
And as far as defense investigators or anybody else coming to your house, you chose not to speak with them, is that correct?
Correct. I was not home when what Mr. Ionetti was talking about. My parents were home, but out of respect, I contacted the defense to tell them the next day, I believe, that I had nothing to have a conversation with them about.
Why not?
I know that legally I didn't have to, and I didn't have anything to say.
Nothing further.
All right, you are all set, Ms. Evans.
Thank you.
Your next witness, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor. Commonwealth call Ms. Julie Nagel to the stand.
Step for me. Main stand, please. Raise your right hand. Just do solemnly swear the evidence here in the court and jury in the case down here to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ma'am.
How you doing?
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Yep, it's Juliana Nagel, Nagel,
And where do you live, ma'am?
Canton, Mass.
And how long have you lived in Canton, Mass?
My whole life.
And who, if anyone, do you live in Canton?
I live with my parents and my brothers, but mostly now just my parents.
And how many brothers do you have?
I have 2 older brothers.
And what are their names and how much older than you are they?
My oldest brother Ryan is 31, and then my other brother Sam is 27.
And do you work, ma'am?
I do. I work for a car rental agency.
How long have you been doing that?
A little over a year and a half.
Now, ma'am, if I could get your attention to January 28th, 2022 into the early morning of the 29th. Do you recall where you were that evening?
I do.
And where did you go that evening?
To my friend Brian Albert's house.
And your friend, that's a Brian Albert Jr., is that correct?
Yes, Junior, yep.
And how is it that you know Brian Albert Jr.?
We went to school together, high school, so I've known him for quite some time.
And was Brian Albert Jr., was he in the same grade or the same class as you? Or
He was a year below me.
and do you recall about what time it was that you went over to his house the evening of the 20th?
I'm not sure exactly, but I would say probably around like 6.
And do you recall what day of the week that was, the 28th and the 29th?
I believe a Friday.
For Friday and Saturday, is that correct? Mm-hmm. And how did you get?
Yes.
How did you get to Mr. Albert Jr.'s house that night?
My dad drove me.
And who, if anyone else, did your dad give a ride to one with?
My friend Sarah Levinson.
How long have you known Sarah Levinson?
Since middle school, I would say.
And you're familiar with Mr. Albert Jr.'s house at 34 Fairview Road?
Correct, yes.
And had you been there on occasion over the course of your friendship?
Yes.
Now, what was, as far as your understanding, what was sort of the plan for that evening?
Just hang out, have some drinks for my friend Brian's birthday. just to gather and hang out.
And when you arrived there, who, if anyone, in addition to yourself, Miss Levinson and Brian Albert Jr. were present at the home at that time?
From what I can recall, I just remember Brian Jr. Yep.
And at some point, did some other people come and join the group of the three of you at the home?
Yes.
And when about was that in relation to when you and Sarah arrived?
I can't remember. I don't recall the time frame.
Sometime after, though?
Yes. Yep.
Was it that came to join the group at some point?
It was me, Brian Jr., Sarah Levinson, Catherine Duty, Emily Fabiano, Mary Kent, Courtney Alba, Colin Albert, and then that's what I can remember from then in the early part of the night.
And so with respect to Ms. Fabiano, Ms. Kent, Ms. Alba, and there was a Ms. Duty as well, is that correct?
Correct.
How did you know them?
Through Brian Jr.
Were
Yep.
they in the same grade or class as you and Ms. Levinson?
In Brian's class.
Class below you?
Correct. Yep.
And so fair to say that you were closer friends with Brian Albert Jr. and Ms. Levinson than the other four girls that came in?
Correct. Yes.
You mentioned, as far as those four individuals, Ms. Fabiano, Ms. Kent, Ms. Duty, and Kent, Ms. Fabiano, Ms. Duty, and Ms. Alba. Did they come together as far as you know?
I don't remember. I'm not sure.
And do you have any idea how they got there?
No, I do not.
Now, with reference to, you mentioned Colin, correct? Mm-hmm. And how do you know him?
So on the mhms, they have to be yes or no.
Okay, got it.
So what was that answer?
Do you mind repeating the question?
Let me
Thank
just
you.
ask the question. So with reference to Colin Albert, did you know Colin Albert prior to that evening as well?
Yes,
And how did you know Colin Albert?
through Brian Jr.
And what, if anything, did you know about the relationship between Colin Albert and Brian Albert?
They're cousins.
And about how old was Colin Albert around this time frame of January 28, 2022?
I'm not quite sure. I don't know.
You know whether or not he was in high school or college or something else?
High school.
And when was it that he arrived in relation to the four young ladies that you were talking about?
I don't remember. A little bit after, though.
Okay, so at some point in time after they had arrived.
Yes,
And they had arrived after you, is that correct?
correct. Yep.
And over the course of the evening within the Albert house, where is it sort of within the home that you and sort of the group were congregating?
We were mostly in the dining room area with the kitchen. It's like an open floor plan a little bit.
And do you recall what specifically, or just generally speaking, what you were doing while you were hanging out and celebrating Brian Jr.'s birthday?
We got some food ordered from Deanie. Just hanging out, drinking. That was it.
Do you recall any music playing or anything like that?
Yes.
And how was that sort of set up, or what was it?
Yeah, I can mostly remember it being set up from the overhead speakers in the kitchen, like in the ceiling.
And was that being played through somebody else's like phone or device or something like that?
Yes.
And do you recall who was sort of in control or who was controlling the music?
I believe it was Caitlin Albert.
And so prior to, at this point in time that you're talking about, sort of the initial with, was Caitlin there at that point?
Yes, she was.
I'm sorry, during the point in time when it was yourself and Ms. Levinson, the other four young women that you were talking about, and Colin Albert, was Caitlin Albert there at that point, if you recall?
Not at that point, no.
So that's what my question was
Okay.
in relation to that time, who, if anyone, was
I
charged.
okay. No, not at that time. I don't remember.
Now, with respect to, now, obviously you were there and you were drinking, people were drinking, correct?
Yep.
Do you recall sort of what people were drinking?
I know at the time I was drinking Michelob Ultras, but mostly just White Claws, beers from what I can remember.
And was anyone within this sort of initial group that we're talking about here drinking any more or less than anybody else?
I don't believe so, no.
And during this sort of initial period with these initial people, how would you describe sort of the mood or the demeanor within it?
Yeah, everyone was having a good time. It was Brian's birthday, so, we were there just to have fun.
And at any point in time with this sort of initial group, did you see anybody go to any other area of the house beyond sort of the kitchen and dining room area?
No.
Now, at some point, did members of this sort of initial group, did they leave the house at some point over the course of the evening?
Yes.
And who left first and you know who left first and about what time?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly who left at what point, but I know that Catherine Duty, Emily Fabiano, Mary, Ken, and Courtney Alba left. I would say, and Colin left like before midnight.
And did they all leave around the same time, or did they leave at sort of staggered portions?
I would say staggered times.
Now, with reference to Colin Albert, do you know about what time he left?
I would probably say 11:30, 11:45.
And do you have any idea sort of how Colin, similar to what I asked about the other young ladies, do you have any recollection as far as how he got there or how he left or anything like that?
I'm not quite sure, no.
But do you recall specifically seeing him leave from the house?
Yes.
And which door would he have left on?
I'm not sure exactly what door, but I know someone did pick him up, but I'm not sure who did, so.
And so when it comes to the front door of Fairview Road, there's two doors in the front area of the house.
Yes.
And as far as with respect to either of those two doors, you don't remember him leaving from some other door to the house, correct?
Correct.
So if he left, or when he left, it would have been from one of those two front doors?
Yes.
Now, at some point, at least after Ms. Canton, Ms. Fabiano, Ms. Duty, and Ms. Alba left, did people that lived at the house or other people sort of come back through the house?
Yes.
And about what time was that?
I'm not too sure, but I would say a little after midnight.
And who were the first people sort of to arrive in this, we'll call them sort of the second house?
I don't remember who came, like who was first, who was second, like that, but I know who came, but I don't know what order.
And who were the people that came?
Yeah, so it was Nicole Albert, Brian Albert, Brian Jr.'s parents, Matt McCabe, Jennifer McCabe, Brian Higgins, and that's it. And Caitlin Albert, sorry.
Okay. And so when they came back, as far as the other four young women that you were talking about, they had already left, is that correct?
Yes.
And Colin Albert, was he still there when those people came back?
He left as well.
And so Brian Albert Sr. and Nicole Albert, those are Brian Albert Jr.'s parents.
Correct, yes.
We're familiar with them, obviously, prior to January 28th.
Yes.
And you mentioned Jennifer and Matthew McCabe, is that correct?
Yes.
And were you familiar with them prior to January 28th?
Yes.
And how are you familiar with them?
I'm through Brian Jr., just hanging out with them a few times, so just know them through the family.
And so through the family, well, my next question is, what, if any, relationship did they have to your friend Brian Albert Jr. that you knew?
They are his aunt and uncle.
And then with respect to Brian Higgins, is that someone that you knew prior to January 20th?
I did not know.
So you met him the first time that night at the Fairview.
Correct, yes.
And when they came into the house, this sort of second group, where was it that they went and sort of congregated around the house?
Yeah, we all were still in the same room in the family area. The floor plan, which was the kitchen and the dining room area. Yeah.
At any point in time, well, let me ask you this. They come sometime shortly around or after midnight, is that fair to say?
Yes.
And about how long after they arrived, or about what time was it that you left the house for the evening?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
At some point, you went home that night?
Yes.
What time was it?
I would say, give or take, like 1:45.
And so between the time that they came back to the house around 12:15 or so, between that and 1:45, how would you describe sort of the mood and the demeanor in the house at that point?
It was still all the same. Everyone was having fun, hanging out.
Music still playing, people drinking, having a good time?
Yes.
And over the course of this time, as far as the group that you talked about that was in the kitchen and dining room area, did you see any of those people go anywhere else?
I mean, to the bathroom, but I know at one point Mr. Albert, Brian's Jr.'s dad, took upstairs to let the dog out back, but he just opened the back door and watched him from the door and brought him right back upstairs. So that was the only time he went upstairs, but
And as far as the kitchen dining room area, do you recall sort of how people were situated around that area during the time that the second group was there?
yeah, we were all sitting in the kitchen table. It's like a square table, so we're all just hanging out around there. Some at the island in the kitchen, but mostly all just there together.
Do you recall specifically, I know we're talking over 2 years ago, do you recall specifically where people were within that area around the table?
I don't know.
Do you recall where you were?
I was sitting in the corner, so I could see the island, the kitchen table, the front door, and the windows, I guess. Yeah.
Where you were seated around the table, could you see the front door?
Yes.
And so beyond the people that you'd already talked about being in that kitchen dining room area in that second group, did anybody else come into the house that night while you were there?
No.
And at the time on January 28, 2022, were you familiar with either a person named John O'Keefe or a person named Karen Reed?
No.
And at any point in time, not knowing them, did you see anybody else come into the house while you were there between that 12 to 12:13 and 1:45 in the morning?
No one else came in, no.
Now, do you recall who was sort of around you where you were at the table? Immediately around you as well.
I would say Jennifer McCabe, Sarah Levinson, Caitlin. I can remember sitting at the table with me. Yeah.
Now, at some point in the evening, let me ask you this: what if any sort of plans did you have as far as how you were getting home?
Yeah, I did text my brother to see if he could pick me up on his way home with his friend, on their way home to come pick me up, which they did.
Which of your two brothers was that?
My brother Ryan.
So you texted Ryan to see if he could come pick you up?
Yep.
And did you have to give him an address or anything like that, or how did you explain to him where you were?
I just said I was at Brian Jr.'s house, if he could pick me up.
And is that somewhere that your brother had picked you up from on prior occasions?
Yes.
And about what time, if you know, did you send that text to your brother about getting picked up?
I'd probably say a little after, probably 15 minutes after midnight. Yep.
And as far as the other people in that second group that you were talking about, did you reach out to Ryan to get picked up? Are those other people there?
Yes.
And you indicated that your brother then came to the house at some point?
Yes, he did.
And about how long after you texted him did he arrive, if you know?
I'm not quite sure.
And when he arrived, did he come into the house or did he reach out to you in any way to let him know?
He just texted, oh, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Did he reach out to you at any point to let you know that he was there?
Yes, he did text me saying that he was outside.
And upon receiving that text, where did you go?
I went out through the front door.
Now, before you went out through the front door, what, if any, conversation, well, let me strike that as far as conversation, but who, if anyone, did you speak to about the fact that your brother was outside of the house?
Yeah, I just mentioned saying my brother's outside. I do remember someone or a few,
I want to hear the answer first.
just a few people saying, oh, just have your brother come in. So I went outside, and it was my brother in the passenger seat, his friend Ricky, and then his ex-girlfriend Heather. I asked them if they wanted to come in. They said no.
I'm going to let that stand, but next question.
So you go outside to where your brother is, right?
Yes,
And do you recall which of the two front doors you used to go outside?
I used the front door.
Front door is the one with the brick steps, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
You come down the brick steps, go down the walkway. Do you recall how you came down to where your brother was?
I walked down the steps through the little path, and then down the driveway, and they were parked right in front of the driveway.
So they were parked right at the end of the driveway?
Yes.
And what kind of vehicle was this that you came up to?
It was Ricky's pickup truck, a Ford F-150.
And you mentioned that there were 3 people in the truck, is that correct?
Yes.
Where were they seated within the truck when you got?
Ricky was driving his truck, Ryan was in the passenger seat, and then Heather was in the back seat.
You mentioned that Heather is Ryan's ex-girlfriend, is that correct?
Correct.
Were they dating at this time?
At that time, yes.
Now, with regard to Ricky is someone who's a close friend of your brother, is that correct?
Yes.
You know him pretty well.
Yep.
And so you get to the truck, do you recall how it was that you were speaking to your brother Ryan? Was it sort of through an open window? Did he open the door? Or how were you communicating?
He rolled down his window.
And when you came out to the truck at the end of the driveway, what, if any, other vehicles did you see in the area of the house on Fairview?
Well, before when I went outside, I did notice another vehicle before my brother pulled up.
So you had gone outside before your brother had, or Ricky had fully sort of parked the truck?
No, he was like fully outside already, and then I went out, and it was just Ricky's truck.
Okay. And so at some point later, there was another vehicle that came up?
Prior.
Right. Okay.
Correct.
And can you describe that vehicle for the jury? Sort of what did it look like? What kind of vehicle was it?
Yeah, it was a black SUV.
And had you ever seen that vehicle before?
No.
And you go up to the truck and you're talking to your brother, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, with regard to, about how long a period of time were you talking with your brother next to the truck?
I would say maybe 3 minutes max, not even.
And did you invite your brother and his friends inside the house?
Yes.
How did they respond?
They said, no, we just want to go home. And then I was like, I'll find out another ride home.
And so that brings me to my next question as far as arrangements for you coming home. Was there any, prior to you coming out of the house, was there any talk or discussion about how you would get home if you didn't go home with your brother?
Yeah, Matt McCabe and Jennifer did offer to drive me home if I didn't want to go home with my brother. So I just stayed and then took their offer.
So you decided you wanted to stay and took them up on their offer?
Correct, yes.
And in addition to yourself, who if anyone else, went home from the residence on Fairview with the McCabe's?
It was me and Sarah Levinson.
Now, if I could bring you back to that period of time when you're outside, the vehicle that you were talking about, where is that in relation to the pickup truck that Ricky's driving?
Well, it was like the SUV wasn't there when my brother was there. It was like before. Like when I was inside, I noticed it. Yeah.
And so at the time that you were talking to your brother in the pickup truck, was the SUV still there?
I don't believe so, no.
And so where was that SUV parked in relation to where the truck was?
So when I noticed, looking out the window, I did notice the SUV in front of the mailbox, and then pulled up a little bit in front of the yard, and then stopped, and then pulled up again towards the flagpole.
So you saw it in sort of 3 different locations at the time that you were seeing it?
Correct, yes.
And again, where were you in relation to the vehicle at the time that you made these observations?
I was inside at the dining room table, looking out the window.
And at any point in time, did you see anybody come out of that?
I did not know.
And at any point in time, did you see any sort of, well, when you came out initially to, or when you were looking out and when you came out, do you recall anything about the weather and sort of what it was doing at that point?
It was, I would say like flakes of snow, a little dust on the ground.
And so from the dust on the ground, from either the SUV or the pickup truck that Ricky was driving, did you see any sort of like imprints in the snow from tires or anything like that?
I don't recall.
You don't recall if there was that much snow or what it was?
Correct.
And as far as anywhere in and around where you had seen the SUV at either of the 3 spots that you saw it, did you see any sort of like footprints in the snow or in the ground or anything like that? And did you see inside of the vehicle, see anybody inside at any point in time?
No.
and you never saw anybody get out of that vehicle at any of the three different points where you saw it parked, correct?
I did not know.
And when you saw the vehicle parked at those three sort of separate different locations, was the vehicle on? Was it running, if you could tell?
I'm not sure, no.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Nagel, I'm going to direct your attention to what's previously marked as Exhibit 71, 72, and 73.
Okay.
Right now, I'm just going to ask you to take a look at those and look up when you're finished. And at some point, I may ask you to use this, which is the laser pointer, press on that button and point it up at the screen. Okay?
Okay.
So first, if you could just look at 71, 72, and 73.
All set.
Generally, with respect to those three photographs, do you recognize what's depicted in them?
Yes.
And what do you recognize?
That it's my friend Brian Albert Jr.'s house.
Is that roughly what the house looked like at the time of January 28th, 29th, 2022?
Correct, yes.
If I could ask you to flip just back to the first one that I showed you, Exhibit 71. And Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish that to the jury at this time?
Okay.
And so, Ms. Nagel, directing your attention up to the screen above you, to your right. This is what you have before you as Exhibit 71, is that correct?
Yes.
If you could, using the laser pointer that's on the desk in front of you, if you could direct the jury's attention to the door that you were talking about that you came out in order to come down and talk to your brother.
Yes. That one right there.
Now, with respect to Ricky's truck, when you came out to speak with your brother Ryan, where was the truck parked?
The truck was parked right here.
And with respect to that vehicle, the black SUV, where that vehicle was initially when you saw it, is that visible in this photograph?
Yes.
And if you could direct the jury's attention to where that. Thank you. If I could draw your attention to the next executive session to flip to Exhibit 72, and Ms. Gilman, if I can have that on. Again, what's up on the screen, is that what you have before you as Exhibit 72?
Yes.
Now, the second position that you indicated you observed that black SUV in with relation to the house, if you could, using the laser pointer, draw the jury's attention where that would be in this photograph.
Objection, sidebar, Your Honor.
So again, Ms. Nagel, directing your attention up to what's up on the screen is Exhibit 72. You indicated in your testimony that you saw the vehicle from inside the house at three different points, correct?
Yes.
You've indicated the first point in the last photograph is the second point that you saw the vehicle in. Is that depicted in this photograph?
Yes.
If you could, using the laser pointer, just direct the jury's attention to that second point was that you saw. If I could ask you just to flip to the next exhibit, number 73. Someone would like to have that up on the screen. And Ms. Nagel, with regard to the third point, or the third different location that you observed that black SUV on that morning, is that visible in this photograph?
Yes.
And again, using the laser pointer, if you could direct the jury's attention to where you observed it at the third point that you observed the black hair. Thank you. That's all with this. Ms. Gilman, you can take that.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Nagel, you speak with your brother outside, and then at some point, after a couple minutes, come back inside. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the people that you had mentioned that were in the kitchen and dining room area, were they still in that area?
Yes.
And at some point over the course of the evening, things eventually start to wind down and people are leaving the house. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you recall what order it was that the people left the house on that morning?
I'm not quite too sure, no.
And with respect to yourself, you indicated that you left with Miss Levinson and the McCabe's, correct?
Yes.
And do you recall who, if anyone else, was present in the home when you left?
I'm not sure, no.
And so when you left, how was it that you came out of the residence at that point?
Out the front door.
Same front door that you had indicated earlier.
Yes.
So let's move on with which door, please. Go ahead.
You come out from that door. Where was it that you went?
Went into Matt and Jennifer's car.
Do you recall anything about the car, what type of car it was, or?
It was an SUV, but I don't know what kind it was.
And where was that vehicle parked when you went over to it?
I was in the driveway.
And do you recall sort of how you came from the front door to the driveway?
Just walked on through the path of the pathway in the front yard and then out the door.
So sort of along the brick path to the driveway to the car.
Yes.
Do you recall when you got in the car where it was you were seated or where anyone else was seated in the car?
Yeah, it was Matt driving, Jennifer in the front, and then me behind Matt, and then Sarah next to me in the back behind Jen.
Now, after you get in the car, about how long was it before the car backs out of the driveway?
I'm not quite too sure.
And what, if any, conversation do you recall as far as going on during that period of time prior to the car backing out and going?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Now, when the vehicle leaves from the house, at some point it's going by the house, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall which side of the McCabe's vehicle was facing towards the house? And by that I mean, was it the side you were sitting on or the side that Ms. Levinson was sitting on?
The side that Sarah was sitting on.
And that would have been the passenger side, is that correct?
Yes.
And at the time that the vehicle was driving by the house, what is it that you were doing at that time?
We were having a conversation. So Jen was kind of facing towards the back, towards me and Sarah. We were talking about making PB and jelly sandwiches because there was some peanut butter and jelly and bread in the car. So talking about that. But yeah.
And so when Ms. McCabe she's in the front seat, is that right?
Yes.
And she's talking to you and Ms. Levinson, correct?
Yes.
And how is it that she's positioned talking to you with relation to the seat that she's in?
Yeah, I would say she was kind of turned back a little bit towards us in the back seat.
And what I'm asking is, she turned towards sort of the center of the vehicle, or she turned towards the window next to her?
Towards the center of the vehicle.
And you're speaking to her and to Ms. Levinson, correct?
Yes.
Which direction are you facing?
Facing towards Sarah and Jen.
And which direction is Sarah facing as you're having this conversation?
Towards me.
And as you drive by the home, what, if anything, did you observe?
I did notice behind Sarah and Jen, I did notice something out of the ordinary, like a black blob in the ground by the flagpole.
And from where you were situated in the car, do you know sort of what was the lighting like over in that area of the yard that you saw by the flag?
It was pretty dark out, but the snow was kind of heavy at that point, so couldn't really see too much, but...
So the snow's coming down at that point?
Yes.
And if you know about where in relation to the flagpole was this black object that you saw?
I'd probably say like close to like the street, but like in their lawn, right kind of in front of the flagpole next to it.
Now, I'm sorry to do this again, but Ms. Gilman, Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would just ask that exhibit number 72 be back up on the screen.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I should actually ask for exhibit number 73. Now, Ms. Nagel, if I could ask, the area where you saw this black object, can you see that area depicted in this photograph?
Yes.
And if you could, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to where, as specific as you can be, where you observed it. We can take that. Now, as the vehicle is going by the house, as you make that observation, what, if anything, did you say in the back seat of the car?
I did say out loud, I was like, I think I might have saw something. I'm not kind of sure what it was. But I was also intoxicated drinking, so didn't really know what I saw. But Sarah was like, "What, Julie?" And I was like, "I don't know what it was." And then that was kind of really it.
And that was sort of the end of the conversation in reference to that, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Let me have a moment, Your Honor.
Okay.
Ms. Nagel, if I could just ask you one more question. With regard to the object that you saw in that area, the flagpole, can you describe how big an object it was that you saw?
I'd probably say like 5 or 6 feet, like long, but
And at the time that you were driving by at that point, could you tell what it was?
not quite sure, no. It was just too quick to tell.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you.
Mr. Unity?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Nagel.
Good afternoon.
On January 28th of 2022, you got to 34 Fairview Road at about 6 or 7 p.m.,
Correct.
and you didn't leave until 1:30 or 2 a.m., correct?
1:45 around there, yeah.
Okay. So you were there approximately 8 hours?
I'm not really sure about the math, but I guess so.
A lot of hours.
Yep.
Other than the people who lived at the home and slept there, you were one of the ones to spend the most time there that night, correct?
I'm not sure.
You got there early. You got there early, correct?
Yes.
And you left late, correct?
Yeah.
And you were inside almost the entire time, correct?
Yes.
So you came in contact with just about everybody who came into that house, correct?
Yes.
And you know that everyone who was in the house that night is a witness in this case, correct?
Yes.
The only time you went outside before you left was when your brother Ryan arrived, correct?
Yes.
And even when you went outside, you stayed on the Albert property, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And you had some contact with your brother out there, correct?
Yes.
And you know that he's a witness in this case as well, correct?
I do, yes.
All right. And despite having contact with all of these witnesses in this case, Trooper Proctor didn't talk to you on January 29th, did he?
No.
Or the rest of January or the whole month of February, correct?
Correct.
He didn't interview you about these statements that you're making today until October of 2022, correct?
If that's what it says on paper, yeah.
October 5 of 2022, does that sound right?
I don't know.
It was many months after January 29th, correct?
Yes.
Over 8 months after John O'Keefe was found dead on Brian Albert's lawn, correct?
If that was the time frame, yes.
And when he spoke to you on October 5, Trooper Proctor asked you for the first time to remember the details from 8 months before that, correct?
If that was the time frame, yes.
And you are good friends with Sarah Levinson, correct?
Yes.
Certainly over the last 2+ years, the two of you have discussed what happened on January 28th and 29th, correct?
Yeah.
And you know that Michael Proctor only interviewed you after the defense in this case filed a motion to get Sarah Levinson's name from the DA's office.
Objection, Your
correct?
Honor.
The objection sustained. Next question.
So you've known Brian Jr. since your sophomore or junior year, correct?
Yes.
And you actually graduated Canton High School in 2016, correct?
Correct.
But you've known him since 2014 or 15,
Yes.
9 or 10 years?
Yep.
He's a good friend.
Yes.
He's a close friend of yours, correct?
Yes.
And on January 28th of 2022, you were one of a select group of his friends who went to his house to celebrate his birthday the following night, right?
Yes.
And you don't go to somebody's house whom you graduated high school with 10 years previously to celebrate their birthday if they're just an acquaintance, correct?
Objection.
I don't know.
I'll let the answer stand.
When you got there, other than Sarah Levinson and yourself, everyone at the house was a member of the Albert family, correct?
Can you rephrase the question, please?
Sure. You and Sarah Levinson are not actually Alberts, correct?
Correct, yes.
But everybody else at the house was when you got there.
No.
You named Brian Albert Jr., correct?
Yes.
Julie Albert,
I did not know.
Nicole Albert,
I did, yes.
Caitlin Albert,
Yes.
Brian Albert Sr. might have been there.
Yes.
And you knew the Alberts well enough to know the names that we just discussed, correct?
Yes.
And in addition to that, the McCabe's were related to the Alberts, correct?
Yes.
And you knew Jennifer and Matt McCabe before that night, right?
I'm sorry, can you...
Yes. Before January 28th of 2022, you knew Jennifer and Matt McCabe.
Yes.
You had been to their home before,
Who's home?
the McCabe's home.
I don't recall.
You'd driven their daughters around, correct?
I have, yes.
And you had actually pet sat for the McCabe's golden doodle, correct?
Correct, yes.
Their home.
Yes.
And so the answer to my previous question is certainly you've been to their home, correct?
Yes.
And their golden doodle was named Bailey, correct?
Yes.
In fact, you knew Jennifer McCabe well enough that you called her by a nickname, correct?
Yes.
What was the nickname that you referred to Jennifer McCabe by?
JJ.
And you knew that JJ was Nicole Albert's sister, correct?
Yes.
Now, on the night of January 28th into the 29th, you saw Brian Albert Sr. After he came back to 34 Fairview, correct?
Yes.
You were on the first floor of that residence the whole night, were you not?
Yes.
And you have a specific memory of Brian Albert Sr. walking Chloe through the first floor of that house, correct?
Yes.
When Brian Albert Sr. was walking Chloe through the first floor of that house, he maintained control of Chloe's collar, did he not?
He did, yes.
You like dogs, right?
I do.
But you didn't pat Chloe, correct?
I have, yes.
That night.
No.
You've never pet sat for Chloe, correct?
No.
But you did hang out regularly at the Albert home for years because of your friendship with Brian Jr., correct?
Yes.
Which meant that you have had contact with Chloe over the years, correct?
Yes.
You would agree with me that Chloe's a very different dog than Bailey, the McCabe's Golden Doodle, correct?
Objection.
Sustain.
Bailey is a friendly dog, is he not?
Objection.
Sustain.
Chloe is not friendly, correct?
Objection.
I'll let you have that. Can you answer that?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, Chloe is not a friendly dog.
I mean, I would say so, yeah.
It was clear to you that she is not good with people, correct?
I'm not aware.
On January 28th and 29th, while you were in the kitchen dining room area, you'll agree with me that there was music playing for most of the night, correct?
For a decent amount, yes.
And that area of the house has surround sound speakers.
Yes.
Everybody was in a good mood,
Correct, yes.
talking,
Yes.
drinking,
Yep.
singing,
And I don't remember.
dancing,
Yeah.
and all the action was in the kitchen dining room area, correct?
Yes.
And that was where your attention was mainly focused, was it not?
It was, yes.
Because that's where everybody was.
Yes.
You were not monitoring the basement door, were you?
No.
And you never went down to the basement, correct?
No, I did not.
Prior to January 28th of 2022, you knew who Colin Albert was, correct?
Yes.
You knew that he was your friend Brian Jr.'s first cousin, right?
Correct.
When you were at 34 Fairview, you did see Colin there, correct?
I did, yes.
You believe that he got there shortly after Nicole Albert, Caitlin Albert, and Julie Albert left the residence, correct?
At some point, yeah.
And you say at some point, that's because you're not sure of the exact time when he got there, correct?
Correct.
You're also not sure of the exact time when he left, correct?
I would say 11:30, 11:45, around there.
He wasn't somebody who was important to you that night, was he?
Not really, no.
You weren't paying attention to monitor when he came or when he left, were you?
No. I said no.
You never physically watched him walk out the door, correct?
I don't remember.
You can't even say which door he walked out, correct?
I don't know.
You never saw him get picked up.
I did not know.
You never saw any car arrive for him.
I don't know.
And you never saw how he got home.
No.
Now, on January 29th of 2022, after midnight, your brother Ryan Nagel and you lived in the same home, correct?
At the time, yes.
At about 12:15 to 12:20, you texted your brother Ryan for a ride home, correct?
If that's what the timestamp says, yes.
Do you have a screenshot of that text message?
Somewhere, yes.
Did you provide that to any investigator or assistant district attorney?
I don't remember.
Do you recall whether any assistant district attorney or investigator asked you for a copy of that text message?
I don't know.
Is that text message still on your phone?
I don't know.
Did you delete that text message?
I don't
Objection,
know.
Your Honor.
So let's move this along, Mr. Unity.
When you texted Ryan that night, you were contacting him because you thought it was an appropriate time for you to leave, correct?
Yeah.
how long did it take your brother Ryan to get to the Albert home after that text message?
I don't know.
Was it an hour?
I don't think so, no.
Was it a half hour?
I do not know.
So you have no idea how long it took him to get there and how long you stayed after you texted him, correct?
I don't know, no.
By the time you're texting Ryan, Ms. Nagel, how much do you think you had had to drink since 6 or 7 p.m.?
A decent amount.
Would you say that another word for it would be a lot?
No.
What were you drinking that night?
Michelob Ultras.
And how many did you have?
I don't know, I don't remember.
Did you bring your own Michelob Ultras to the party?
I don't know.
You don't remember whether you brought any beer to the party?
I don't know.
Where was the beer?
I either brought it or, I don't know, I don't remember. It was 2.5 years ago.
Where was it within the home?
In the fridge.
You have no memory of like running out of beer that night, correct?
I don't remember, no.
There appeared to be plenty of beer to go around, correct?
For myself, yeah.
Between the time that you texted your brother Ryan and the time he arrived, it's fair to say that you changed your mind about going home with him, correct?
Yes.
You changed your mind while you were still inside the Albert home, correct?
I did not say that, no.
Well, I'm asking you now.
No.
You changed your mind only after you left the residence and went out to talk to him?
Yes.
You claimed on direct examination that he was the one that said, "Why don't you stay longer?"
No, that's not what I said.
Who was it that said that you wanted to stay longer?
If myself?
So you told him that you wanted to stay longer, correct?
Yeah. I did.
And when you went outside, you learned that he had come and his friend, is it Ricky D'Antuono? How do you pronounce the name?
It's Ricky D'Antano.
D'Antano. Ryan had come in Ricky D'Antano's gray Ford F-150 truck, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I butchered that. When you went outside, you saw that your brother Ryan was in Ricky D'Antano's gray Ford F-150 truck, correct?
Correct, yes.
He was sitting in the front passenger seat of the truck, correct?
Ryan, yes.
The truck was parallel to the Albert's residence, correct?
Yes.
It was not parked in the driveway.
No.
The truck was facing toward Chapman Street, toward going up the hill, correct?
Yes.
So Ryan's seat would have been the closest to the property, right? Passenger seat?
I'm sorry, closest to the what?
To the Albert home.
Yes, correct.
You walked down the driveway to get to the truck, correct?
Yes.
Cave's SUV was in the driveway at that point, was it not?
Yes.
And at that point, it's like that. I want to go back, if I can, to when you were inside the house, because you had testified that when you were inside, you looked out the window and you saw a different vehicle, correct?
I did, yes.
That was the black SUV.
Yes.
And you've testified that you saw that black, from within the house, you saw that black SUV move 2 times, correct?
More than 2.
So it was at first parked near the mailbox,
Yes.
and then you saw it move forward, right?
Yes.
And then you saw it move forward again to near the flagpole, correct?
Yes.
And was there a third time that you saw it moved?
I saw it pull up, stopped, pulled up again, stopped, pulled up again by the flagpole, stopped. That's all I saw.
All right.